Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining National University's Fundraising Academy's monthly webinar. Today, we're looking at the great acquisition, finding new donors in these challenging times. My name is Muhi Khwaja. I'm a trainer with National University, and we're so excited to be partnering with Feather and Isa Hasty today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just a little bit of background on Fundraising Academy. We provide a lot of resources for fundraising professionals to help with their professional development through these at no cost webinars and a multitude of other resources that we'll get into sharing later. As I mentioned, my name is Muhi Khwaja, been a trainer with Fundraising Academy for a few years and really honored to be moderating today's session. Really grateful for Isa to be joining us as well. And she is the Senior Manager of Product Positioning at Feather. And I'm going to pass it over to her to get into the objectives and start us off.
Cool. Thanks, Muhi. So as he said, I am Isa Hasty, joining from Feather. So we are the digital marketing platform for nonprofits. So we serve a variety of 501(c)(3)s, member-based organizations across the full spectrum of nonprofits. And we offer digital outreach strategies, fundraising tools, ways to get on all of the channels that you want to be reaching people online, especially younger people, which is going to be the main focus of today's presentation. So I've been at Feather for almost 7 years now. And so I've worked with lots and lots of nonprofits, seen what really works well, and seen how successful they are when they are getting on these channels, doing digital advertising, doing social media in the right way, search engine marketing, email marketing, all of these things. So having sort of the right combination of all of these channels is absolutely the way that you need to be thinking about your marketing as a nonprofit, and especially heading into the future, which is a very sort of, I think, unstable landscape, especially these days. So having the right tools in place is key. So just some quick agenda items. We'll be covering those changes in the giving landscape that we're seeing and how to cope with them. Some next generation personas, sort of looking at what Gen Z and millennials are doing, what they're doing online, where you need to be in order to get in front of them and get them to become the future of your organization in terms of those sustainers, those givers long term. Tools and channels for outreach. So I'll be talking all about the channels that you need to be showing up on and ways that you can do that. So if you feel like, okay, I know I need to be doing more on social media, but I don't really know what, I have a lot of advice for you on that and just some other tips and tricks in terms of digital advertising channels that you might not know about. Or if you do, hopefully there's still some key takeaways for you in terms of budgeting, benchmarks, some goals that you should be trying to hit as a nonprofit venturing into this space. So yeah, so why do we care about this? So Feather in particular cares about this because we serve nonprofits and we want to make sure that we are helping as many nonprofits as possible set themselves up for long-term success. And so there are some exciting trends happening in the industry right now. Giving is up in general, and individual giving is up in terms of the total amount being given. However, the number of individual donors is going down. And so this means that a lot of nonprofits are relying heavily on those major donors, right? And so it's amazing that they're giving in such large amounts that the overall amount in individual giving is increasing. But what we want is to make sure that we're getting ahead of the transfer of wealth that's going to be happening in the next 2 decades, making sure that you're staying and putting your mission in front of newer, younger generations so that when that transfer of wealth happens, you are going to be top of mind for them and they are going to be interested in potentially giving, sharing some of that wealth with your organization. So, according to this study, you can see that a significant wealth transfer is currently underway. And some estimates indicate that 18 trillion, so that's trillion with the T, will go to charity by 2048, creating the opportunity for the next generation of donors to have a significant charitable impact in the future. So you want to make sure that you are getting a slice of that pie by getting in front of those people. So again, really cool, positive trends happening. Individual giving is up. And it's up, it increased more than any of these other sources of giving. I think it's more than 4 times as much as these other sources. So it's obviously, we're getting a lot of money coming in from those individual donors. That is a positive sign. People are charitable, but we're largely still relying on those major donors that might be older. And then, as you can see here, giving also went up across all of these categories, all of these sectors of the nonprofit space. And so that's also an amazing sign, right? All of these different areas of nonprofit work are getting support, they're getting attention, and they're getting funds. So if you fall into any of these categories, which hopefully, most of you do, you should be happy, give yourself a pat on the back, but the work doesn't stop there. You want to make sure that you're getting in front of young people as well as your current donors. So yeah, so this broad increase in giving across the subsectors obviously shows that philanthropy is alive and well. Nonprofit sectors were thriving in 2024 and 2025, and the growth, demonstrates robust donor support for a myriad of causes. This is from the Giving USA Foundation, and so they have, a lot of really helpful reports and information about giving trends. So I recommend checking out that report. But yeah, giving is definitely alive and well, but want to make sure that you're getting in front of the right people. So let's look at some of those changes in the landscape and how you can think about younger donors and how to get in front of them. So, younger generations, these are just some general trends, and then we'll get more specifically into how to think about each generation. So, younger generations seek longer term, hands on involvement with the issues that are important to them. So, it is a lot more about identity based giving. It's about seeing the impact of the work that your organization is doing. They're not giving for clout or for reputation. I think a lot of previous generations gave, and it was still, charitable and philanthropic of them, but it was coming from a different place, sort of more of a status-based giving, especially for a lot of major donors, corporate donors, right? They know that that's the right thing to do and they have disposable income to give, and so they were willing to help out your cause. With younger generations, there's obviously going to be the challenge of even them not necessarily having the money to give in the first place, definitely not that amount of money that you're getting from your major donors currently, but also they just desire a more, I think, more proof of the actual impact that's being made by your organization and that their dollars are going toward the cause. They want to see that in action and in real world terms. Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted to add in here, thinking through different audiences and segments, and I'm actually working on a appeal letter right now. So for this specific letter, I'm crafting it to people who already have a link. They've already expressed ability by supporting the organization I'm representing and writing the letter for. But I need to further define and find out what that interest is, and showcasing that by supporting this institution, they're helping solve a problem, right? And build that connection with the audience that I'm writing to. So I always try to put my shoes and put my thinking cap on in
Hmm.
terms of how is this letter going to inspire them to give? What is it going to connect or evoke a response towards?
Yeah,
And hopefully, by looking at some of these trends that we're going to look into, we can kind of clearly define what to include in these appeals that we try to put in front of our donors.
for sure. And it is just a matter of trying to put yourself in their shoes and thinking about what's important to them and then translating that into your messaging and even your mission statement. It's worth revisiting, I think, how you talk about your organization, how you talk about your cause, because a lot of the time that language just sort of stays over the years, over the decades, and you're not revisiting the very basic language that you're using to explain what you do. And sometimes you could actually be icing out people who are not necessarily, that's not gonna resonate with them. And so there's ways that you can, think about, like, for example, an environmental organization. I think a lot of younger people think about sustainability as sort of a keyword, but a lot of environmental organizations maybe don't necessarily have that word in their tagline or whatever. They might say like save the planet or things like that. And so just make sure that you're not using outdated phrases and thinking about what are the terms that are actually sort of like hot button terms that people are going to be interested in and are thinking about and saying among their peer groups too, you know? You want to make sure that you're staying sort of with the times in that way, just in terms of your very basic messaging, and then that will trickle into how you show up in your ads and your emails and your letters, you know, appeal letters and everything that you're doing. Um, so yeah, and then obviously they are a tech first generation. So I'll get into this a little more, you know, Gen Z even more so than millennials, but you want to make sure that your website is mobile friendly. Everything that you're doing is a seamless user experience on mobile devices, and that you're reaching people on all of the channels that they're going to be spending time on all of their devices. And then again, just that trustworthiness factor. So you want to make sure that you are investing effort in coming across as trustworthy, and it needs to be genuine. You know, you want to be showing the impact, you want to be building the trust, giving people time to trust you, continuing to show up and trust in the process yourself, right? And believe that if you're showing up in the right way with the right messaging, the right people who are the right fit for your cause are going to come to you and stay with you. So, transparency is key, and trust building is key for these younger generations. So let's talk about Gen Z and millennials. So the defining qualities that kind of overlap across both of these generations are, like we said, focusing on supporting issues rather than the organizations themselves. There's a little bit less trust in institutions and organizations, more of a focus on what is the issue. You know, I feel like the world is falling apart. What can I do to help in some small corner do a little bit of good, you know? Considering ourselves active social change agents, so thinking about ways that we can have that direct impact through organizations like yours. Tech forward approach, so making everything as easy as possible to do online, right? So you want to have a tech forward approach to learning, advocating, and that donation process. Go through your own donation flow, go through, you know, click around, click on an ad, and then go to your website and make sure that everything is working on your own mobile device. Maybe even have a friend check it, you know, get input on how that process looks to make sure that it's mobile friendly, and there's really easy ways to tweak things and improve things if it's not, but that is like where you need to be starting in terms of making sure that you're online in the right ways, and then, you know, going from there in terms of getting on all of the right channels. But your website is your best asset. That's where you're going to be able to gather that really important first party data about your audience, who's coming to your website, who's leaving without donating, getting back in front of them. All of this stems from bringing people to your site through a user-friendly, seamless online experience. So that is key. And then younger people participate more in crowdfunding than older generations. I actually just did this myself recently. I contributed to a GoFundMe for a friend whose uncle was in the hospital. And so I know that that's, you know, just a very common way that younger people think about giving. It's again, it's that trust thing is just sort of built in inherently there with crowdfunding. And so if you can find ways to yeah, get people in your community, connect with influencers, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but getting that, you know, that trust built in through that peer-to-peer kind of crowdfunding approach can also be really impactful. And younger people also give through social media-based events, often hosted by influencers. So want to make sure that you are connecting with the right people and on all the right social channels. So let's dig in more specifically to each generation and kind of what does distinguish millennials from Gen Z. So you can make sure that you're reaching both. And again, you know, you might not have the resources or the time to be thinking about all of these different intricate, you know, like differences between the two generations. So finding sort of the cusp of the two and trying to do as much as possible in terms of reaching both is a great starting point. But I just want to talk through this because I think it really drives home that there are key differences between millennials, which are the largest generation in the US now, and Gen Z, which are close behind. So these are two of the big generations that you're going to be wanting to focus as much effort on as you have with your current major donors. So the age range for millennials is 29 to 44. We're spending about 6.5 hours online daily, which sounds like significant, but pretty reasonable. Gen Z is up at plus 10, 10 plus hours. Um, Millennials tend to use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. These are the main platforms that millennials are spending their time on. We prefer long form content like detailed videos and podcasts, although I will say I think I, for myself as a millennial, and I know a lot of my friends are getting more into short form content. I think platforms like TikTok, Reels, YouTube Shorts, like that is pervasive, and it's making it easier for us to kind of consume that sort of like short, short and sweet content in addition to the longer form content. So doing both of those can be helpful. We tend to browse on mobile devices, but make purchases on computers, which I actually just think is funny. I know that I do that for plane tickets and like big purchases. I'm trying to be cool and like be able to do more purchases on my mobile devices, but I do tend to trust the bigger screen more. So I think that's just built in for some of us. And then we're more likely to convert through those traditional online ads that then lead to a page or a landing page or a website and social media marketing in the more traditional sense than Gen Z. So Gen Z, this age range is 13 to 28. So you're going to have a lot of really passionate young people who want to be agents for social change, but at the same time, a good portion of this generation still has to kind of ask mom and dad for money, right? It's not like they all have this disposable income that they can give. And even on the older side of this generation, they're not going to be the wealthiest, portion of the population. So you're still not relying on Gen Z to be the bulk of your individual donations right now, but you want to be getting your cause in front of them and relying on them as a source of support in other ways, sharing your cause online. That peer-to-peer fundraising can be really impactful with younger generations like Gen Z. And so Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, and TikTok are four of the main platforms that they're spending time on. They're twice as likely to purchase online as millennials. So that's another, again, really big, reason to be making your website mobile friendly, making everything fully functional and user friendly on mobile devices, because that's where you can see people drop off, right? If they see an ad on Meta, they click on it, and then there's sort of some glitchiness or whatever when they get to your site, or they're seeing something in an ad and then they're not seeing the same thing reflected on the page that they land on, that they can drop off because not only are you not making it seamless for them, but that can also even cause some trust issues or feel like, okay, does this organization even have it together? So making sure that everything is on point in that regard. Wary of traditional ads. So, unlike millennials that I think are a little bit more receptive to those traditional marketing strategies, Gen Z leans more toward social media and influencer marketing and just that sort of human to human, or one to many, but coming from a human, sort of word of mouth marketing. And they are likely to convert via TikTok or Instagram. So again, those are places that you might want to, try setting up an account if you haven't already, toy around with that. It can be hard, I think, with something like TikTok to sustain that if you don't feel like you have somebody on your team who's going to be able to keep up a presence on TikTok. Maybe don't do that yet. Maybe, hold on that and then hire a young person whenever you have the budget for like a social media, intern or employee who could take that on full time and really know what they're doing there. But if you feel like you might have some ideas to get on TikTok and do some really short form content, that's a great place to drive awareness. So not a whole lot of conversions happen on TikTok compared to just the organic reach that you will have, but it is still a wonderful place to be reaching young people through short form content. And again, if you're trying to reach both groups, sort of in one fell swoop, things to focus on again are they're caring less about the status, more about the impact. So lead with impact statements, proof of impact. Skeptical of institutions and partisan politics, so try not to lean into that. Try to focus more on the issue, the reason that your organization exists, and the good that you're doing in the world. Transparency, authenticity, all of that. And again, there's less money to go around in these younger generations, but they will have money later. So you want to be in front of them when that transfer of wealth does happen in the next 20 years. And in the meantime, young people do place a lot of value on other assets outside of just their money. So this includes time, right? That could be volunteering, social networks, that could be sharing things with friends, leadership skills, ideas. So if you can connect with a local university or a local school to get some eager students on board who might want to contribute ideas or contribute their time to your organization. Maybe you connect with, the IT department at a university or school nearby, and you have somebody help you like make your website mobile friendly or optimize some stuff on the tech side of things or on the back end. There's plenty of young people who are really good at this and would be happy to help, a charitable organization be online and do a better job there. So find ways to connect with young people outside of just asking them to give money because they have tons of value to offer to your organization before they are going to be set up to be major donors for you. So just some specific examples of some things that you could think of doing instead of more traditional campaigns. So instead of a naming rights campaign for a capital campaign that you might be running, so a lot of the time, people like to have their name on a bench or on a brick or something like that. So you don't have to stop doing this if it's working for you, right? So I think one of the main things I want to make clear here is I'm not telling you to stop the efforts that are working with major donors. They are currently sustaining your organization. So don't stop anything that's working, but just think about new ways that you could get in front of young people as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be instead of, right? But another thing you could consider in addition to something like a naming rights campaign would be a P2P competition to select design and impact elements for a children's hospital, right? So the peer-to-peer element is going to get you in front of more people. It's going to build that trust. And younger people might be more interested in the idea of having some say in the way that a children's hospital looks as kids are spending, some of the worst weeks or months or years of their life in this place. The idea of making an impact on how that place looks, and hopefully making a kid's life better. Even if you are sort of going unnamed, right? You're contributing, but your name isn't going to be on a plaque. I think that's still very appealing to people. So offering different ways for them to have a real tangible impact in the world. So not just giving money, but giving the money, and as a result, they're being able to shape something real that exists in the world. And so it doesn't have to be their name, featured somewhere. It can be something else. So get creative with that. And then in terms of just reframing things so that it sounds a little more creative and you're thinking about it in the terms that your donors are thinking about it. We've all seen this sort of thermometer type of thing, right? Where you're getting to your goal, how many funds raised, whatever. Instead of that, so Mr. Beast, the YouTube influencer, partnered with Team Seas a couple of years ago to remove trash from the ocean. And the way that they framed it was, how many pounds of trash would you like to remove from the ocean? So instead of how many dollars do you want to give, they were asking really how much impact do you want to have on this campaign? And so I would imagine that this drove more, this was a highly successful campaign. They removed hundreds of thousands of well, actually, no, millions of trash, of pounds of trash from the ocean. As you can see here, 34 million pounds, right? So this was an amazing campaign. And I would imagine a huge part of that was just the way that they framed it. So if you ask people to give $20, they may or may not. But if you ask them, do you want to remove 5 pounds or 20 pounds of trash from the ocean? A lot of people might, err on the side of 20 just because that sounds really impactful. And it sounds real and tangible. So yeah, ways that you can think about this, if you are a food bank, think about how many families would you like to feed this season, right? If you're a pet rescue organization, how many animals would you like to help vaccinate? How many animals would you like to help spay or neuter? So there's different ways that organizations can do this type of thing. So just kind of think about your ask, think about what the money goes to and what that equates to. And if you can reframe the ask in terms of that in a way that's going to make people think, oh, wow, like the impact is being shared with me as I'm giving. That's cool. I can really sort of see where each dollar is going. And then some different fundraising models that work well, right? So small recurring gifts, subscription models, this can be a great way to get people to give smaller amounts, but over time. And sustainers are actually a lot more sustained giving comes from repeat donors. So if you're able to get those recurring donors, rather than just the one-time givers, they tend to stay around longer and give more over time. So you definitely want to make sure that you are investing effort in getting recurring donors. And I think this can be a difficult thing to do sometimes when you're just so focused at whatever appeal is at hand and you're just going day to day, just trying to, make things happen. And you don't have a lot of time to think about, okay, how do I actually get in front of people who've given once, but then didn't give again? How can I get them to sign up to become a recurring donor? This is a challenge. I think a lot of nonprofits are struggling with it, but there's ways that you can make it feel like a community, which I think can be a really helpful thing. So we work with a rehab services center in Grand Rapids, Michigan called Guiding Light. They're a wonderful organization that Feather works with, and they call their sustainers light keepers. So that's just, a sweet like term that they use to refer to the people who are recurring givers. It builds that sense of community, and when you have sort of an identity or a word to associate with your identity, and it brings you together with other people in the community who are like-minded. Consistent updates, so you want to be keeping that helpers high going, so giving sustainers updates on what's happening. Even if nothing big happened, you might be doing newsletters or something customized for those recurring givers to make them feel like they are part of a community and that they're getting, your attention because they deserve it. And then automating engagement based on what they're supporting. So you should not be in a place in 2026 where you are manually segmenting things and manually sending out emails based on what somebody did. This is all stuff that you can automate, set it up in the background so that if somebody visits a certain page, gives to a certain program, they're going to be getting a series of thank you emails and then follow-ups based on what they gave to. So this is all stuff that you want to make sure is automated so that you aren't wasting your time because you obviously are probably strapped for resources and time as it is. Nonprofits are working really hard, often with really limited teams. And so you want to make sure you're automating everything that you possibly can. And then when it comes to gift matching campaigns, these make donors 85% or 85% of donors are more likely to give when it is a gift match campaign. And they're not only more likely to give at all, they're more likely to give more. So it really just drives that kind of, gift that keeps on giving kind of mentality where you think, okay, if I'm giving 10 and it's matched 2x, it's 20. So like if I give 20, it's 40, And so I think it really does like compound on itself in a way that can be very positive. So if you find, if this feels appealing to you and you don't really know where to start, thinking about those major donors or those corporate donors can be a really great place to start in terms of finding gift match campaign opportunities. So if you have a major donor who gives $10,000 a year pretty regularly, you could ask them, do you want to partner with us on this? And we can say, hey, we'll match up to $10,000 in gifts. And you can even split that up over, the course of the year. If you have two or three major appeals, you could split the 10,000 into two or three different segments and say, okay, we're matching up to 2,500, we're matching up to 5,000. So you can get creative with how you spread out the amount that's being matched across the year if you want. Or if it is that like end of year, big drive for donations, you could just have a large amount, like we're matching up to 20,000 coming up on end of year. Give and your gift will be matched. So lots of ways you can play around with this as well, but these are highly impactful in terms of driving people to give and driving people to give more than they would. So definitely recommend gift matching campaigns if you can make those work. And then creating advocates more than anything, right? So obviously recurring giving programs are great, gift match campaigns are great, but at the end of the day, those all require, a lot of setup and connections. And so you should be thinking about those things. But you also want to be thinking about your potential donors as human beings. Their first action might not be to make a donation. It might just be to want to get involved in another way or learn more. So just be thinking about all of the different ways that these people can learn about your cause, be interested in your cause, engage. And the goal is just to stay in front of them, right, over time and make sure that you're not falling off the radar because there's so many distractions. There's so many retail companies competing for their attention. There's so many other nonprofits, right, competing for those donations. And so even though the nonprofit space, I don't think considers itself to be super competitive amongst each other, there still is a matter of, okay, there's only so many dollars to go around. You want those dollars to go to your cause. And so make sure that you're showing up in all of the places you can to make it as likely as possible that people will give to your cause. And then hire young people if you can. So hire Gen Zers, hire young people to do your social media, to be the person who's getting you on TikTok, on Instagram. And so these, younger people are going to have insight into how their generation thinks about things, and they're going to have really helpful tips about, ways that you can sort of get ahead of the curve and start appealing to younger people now rather than in 20 years, right? So, what are some tools and channels that can help you get in front of younger people and just the right audience members for you in general? So, we're focusing a lot on younger audiences today, but the goal isn't to get in front of young people in general. It's to get in front of the right people for your organization. So, you want a lot of those people to be younger because they're the future, right? But you also want to be getting in front of Gen X people who are, the right fit for your cause, but maybe don't know about you yet. So, it's about, showing up in front of the most relevant people, getting them to your site, and then continuing to follow up because they showed interest by visiting your site. So let's talk about a few different campaign types that you can run to stay in front of people and to get in front of net new audiences. So this is what we call geofencing. So you basically are drawing a perimeter around a physical location. So this is actually a heat map that you can see. This is from Feather. So this is from the Feather platform. You can see a map, and these yellow bubbles are where this person has decided to show ads. So these are Barnes and Noble's locations and a mall in Asheville. This is an example from United Way of Asheville and Buncombe County. So basically, what they wanted to do, they were having an annual holiday book drive. They wanted to get in front of people who would be likely to give to an annual book drive. And so they geofenced, right? So you're basically drawing sort of a digital perimeter around a physical location in your town, in your state, in your city, whatever that looks like, and serving ads to people who are in that physical space. And so if people are at this mall or they're sitting at this Barnes and Noble browsing, they might see ads for this annual book drive on their mobile device because they're in the Barnes and Noble. So you're basically taking physical location, thinking about, okay, where are my potential donors and my current donors spending time? Okay, I'm going to serve ads to those locations. You can also do this retroactively. So if you are thinking, okay, I think, for example, if you are a performing arts organization and you want to geofence other theaters, right? Because you think, okay, like people who might want to come to my show that's coming up probably are going to other shows. So you might want to geofence other nearby theaters, but you would want to do what we call historical geofencing because while people are at those theaters, they're not browsing on their mobile devices and potentially seeing your ads. They're focused on the show. So what you're doing is you're saying, okay, that place, they were in that place. That means they're valuable to me. I want to serve them ads after because they were in that place. So you can serve them ads while they're in that place or after because they were there. All of it just comes down to thinking about where your ideal audience members are spending their time, finding those places on the map, and then geofencing those locations, serving ads to those people. So some other examples of places you can geofence are college campuses, schools, if you're trying to reach older kids who might be interested in volunteering or getting their friends together to raise some money around the neighborhood. Parents of young children also are, going to be spending time at schools. Sporting events, shopping centers, people are likely to have disposable income if they're shopping, so that can be also a great audience to get in front of, especially if you can really drill down in terms of, okay, this is a book drive, let's get in front of people who are at bookshops, right? That means they're book lovers, that means they have money to buy books, they might have old books they're trying to give away. So there's lots you can do here in terms of getting creative with locations and thinking about where people are spending their time. And then you can find younger people based on who they are. So this is basically pulling data on people's demographic information, their interests, their values, right? So as we each, as individuals, spend time online, we leave behind little breadcrumbs, right, about who we are, what we're interested in, what we are looking for in life. And so you're able to take that information and create very, very niche audiences and then serve ads to those people. So as you can see, you can get specific, like, I want to reach parents who are between 28 and 43 years old and have more than $100,000 in household income. You can reach, mothers of toddlers in the California, in the Bay Area. You can get really, really specific. This is third-party data. So there's data suppliers that provide this data to platforms like Feather, and plenty of other marketing platforms as well. But you can do this in the right marketing platform. This data is anonymous, right? So you don't know who these people are. You don't know their names. You don't know where they live. You just know things about how they've spent their time online and what they might be interested in. So and another way to think about this, I think a lot of the time, I hear like, oh, is this creepy? Is this weird? The fact is, for-profit organizations are already doing this. When you think about the ads for shoes that follow you around. You look at a pair of shoes, you leave the site, whether it's Amazon or wherever you shop for your clothes and your shoes, those shoes will follow you around until you either buy them or you buy something similar, right? And so for-profit organizations know how to get people to spend money. Nonprofit organizations, I think, are a little wary of these tactics because it feels very money driven. It feels sort of like antithetical to the philanthropic nature of nonprofits. But the fact is, you need people's money too. You have to be online and you have to be using these tactics that for-profit organizations are using. And people are seeing so many ads, so many consumer ads. So they will actually be, I think, happy. It's a breath of fresh air to see ads from a nonprofit, right? About a good cause that they are more than likely interested in because you found them because of their online browsing history and their demographic information. So when you are serving those really targeted ads to people based on who they are, and you're asking them to give to a good cause, they're not going to find that creepy or annoying, right? And so really, if anything, the challenge is showing up enough times. Like, if you think you're overdoing it, you're not. If you feel like you're too showing up too many times, it's a blessed problem because it means you have enough budget to be showing up that many times, right? So you want to make sure that you are not thinking about it as something that you shouldn't be doing or you should sort of, stay away from. This is absolutely how brands are successful in getting people to come back to their site and convert. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do too. So don't shy away from it.
Yeah, and I think, it takes somebody looking at something about 7 times to maybe make an act on it, right? So
Yes.
even by looking at, a web page on your nonprofit site and then they leave, they can then use the cookies from that transaction online to then create ads to then remind them about your organization, right?
Even.
So similar concepts in the consumer world, but I think it's very helpful in tracking that. And I know that you know, those retargeting strategies often are a gentle nudge to bring the donor a little bit closer to supporting your organization.
Absolutely. And I'll talk about that not on this slide, but on the next one. Retargeting really is the crux of this, right? So, what I'm talking about so far is getting in front of new people, sort of using that third-party data or locations to get in front of people. But your warmest audience is people whose email you have or people who have recently been to your website. And so, when you have the right tracking code in place on those pages on your website, those high intent pages, you can see who's coming. Again, this is anonymous data, so you're not infringing on any kind of, privacy laws, but you can see, okay, this anonymous person came to the site from this ad, they clicked here, they did this, and then they left without converting. And like you said, it takes multiple touches, not only to get somebody to come to your website in the first place, but to get them to convert. So we've seen some stats between 81 and 84% of people will leave without converting from your website on the first visit. And also the 7 touches, I've heard crazy figures. I've heard that it takes 43, 45, like, and it sounds so much, but we see hundreds, if not thousands of ads every day. And again, that sounds like more than you see, but you are seeing ads constantly everywhere as you're browsing on social media, as you're browsing on websites. You might not notice them all, but they're there. And so we are constantly being served ads. And so when it comes to those awareness ads, you do have to serve many of those in order to finally get somebody new to say, oh, hey, I'm interested in this. And some channels are more impactful than others. Like somebody sees, an ad that looks like a native post on Facebook, that's going to be maybe a little bit more compelling than a banner ad on, a recipe website. But all of these are important in terms of building that sort of surround sound awareness to eventually get them to click through. And then to your point, once they do, you do have that tracking data in place so that you can continue to reach them with even more targeted ads because you know what page they visited, you know what they clicked on, you know what they might be interested in. So that's where you can set up, and again, this can be automated, but you can set up, a series of ads and outreach that is going to speak directly to what they did on your website and hopefully get them to come back and convert. So search targeting. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. SEO is that organic website optimization. So this is where you are trying to organically show up as far to the top of the search results page as possible. So this is just, making sure that you have the right backlinks on your website, that you're, linking. If you have, an About Us page, you want to make sure that there's some links on that page to other pages about your programs on your website. There's a lot you can do in terms of creating content to show up in searches, right? So SEO is definitely important. SEM, you're paying to show up at the top of the search page. So when you Google something and you see those top results that say sponsored, that is Google Ads or search engine marketing. So you want to be investing some money there if you can. I know a lot of organizations struggle with Google Ad grants. It sounds great, but then I think it can be very hard to maintain. There's a lot of sort of stipulations and it makes it difficult to really maintain it month over month. So there are definitely some ways to do that, and Feather actually lets you manage your Google Ad Grant directly in the platform too. So that kind of puts it all in one place and makes it easier. But I have heard a lot about, I'm curious, Muhi, if you've heard the same, but a lot of organizations struggling to just kind of keep that funding month over month because there's so much to manage and these teams are already sort of strapped for time.
Yeah, I think it can definitely be challenging in prospecting, possible new supporters and then tracking that to become potential donors and then moving that along with the
Yeah.
engagement strategy to then become a first time donor and then an annual donor. There's all these cultivation and stewardship strategies all
Yep.
along the way integrated through that process. And donor retention is definitely a challenge. But if you're able to implement all of these strategies to people who've already given to your organization, you're
Mhm.
just going to be that much more likely to engage them. And the more you know about your donors, like their demographics, it could be
Yep.
their geolocation, it could be their age, it could be the industry they're working in. All of these things will help you understand who your donor personas are,
Mhm.
and then you can build strategies along lines those personas to hopefully engage your donors in more meaningful ways.
Yep, absolutely. And then a third form of search marketing is what is basically display, right? So those ads that show up, just like with geofencing and with affinity targeting, these are the ads that show up as you're browsing other websites around the web. So this could be news websites, the New York Times, this could be recipe websites, Meta, right? All of the social media platforms. So you want to be showing up in those banner ads as well. And the way that you can do this is similar to Google Ads or SEM, where you're thinking about, okay, what are the terms that my ideal audience member is searching for? I want to basically bid to show up when somebody searches for those terms. With SEM, you're bidding to show up on the search results page. With display, you're bidding to show up after they've left the search results page. So again, with those ads across the web as they're browsing, if they search for relevant terms, so if they search for, cancer research, where to donate, pet rescue near me, things like that, you can then show up even days later as they're browsing the internet with ads for your organization because they search for that, for those terms. So ideally, you're combining all of this into sort of a campaign that all works together so that if somebody searches something, they might see you pop up at the top. If they don't click on it, they'll then see your ads in other places and ideally, see you enough times where they're going to click because they obviously recently were looking for that thing. And so it's top of mind for them. This is all about timeliness, showing up because somebody recently searched for something that you deem relevant. So that's the best time to get in front of them and stay in front of them. So you want to be doing your research, make sure that you are up to speed on industry trends and phrases. But keep in mind that you want to be ranking for words that your people are actually going to be searching for. So when we think about food insecurity versus feed the hungry, there's a lot of conversations around we don't want to call unhoused people homeless. We don't want to call people with food insecurity the hungry, right? But what are people actually searching for, right? People might not know all of the sort of correct terms to use to refer to these communities because people who are experiencing food insecurity, that is not their identity. That is something they're going through. But people who are just looking to give some money, especially older generations who might not be up to speed on all of the correct naming conventions, they might be a lot more likely to say, feed the hungry, homeless shelters near me, things like that. So you want to be taking that into consideration and showing up when people are searching for those terms, in addition to these other terms like food insecurity, um, and things like that. So thinking again, putting yourself in the shoes of your potential donors. What is the language they use to talk about my cause, and how can I show up when they're searching for those things? And then once I get them in the door, once they become part of my organization, I can kind of educate them on how we talk about this issue, right? But that's the next step. The first step is getting them to learn about you and give you money if they have money to give. Um, okay. And then this is retargeting. So, like we just talked about, this is the bread and butter of what Feather offers. And I think this is, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, it should be that you want to be tracking the people who are coming to your website and then following up with ads and lots of ads, right? So Feather offers what we call a super pixel. This is basically a simple line of tracking code that you install on the back end of any pages on your website, any event website that you have that you want to track activity on. And then once people visit and leave, you can stay in front of them with ads. So this is called retargeting. You might have heard about cart abandonment in terms of email, right? So if somebody puts something in their cart and leaves, or visits your donate page and leaves, if you do have their email, you can send them a follow-up email. If you don't have their email, you can't send them a follow-up email, but you can follow up with cart abandonment ads, right? That look like this. So these are just a few examples from Second Harvest Food Bank. So this is a food bank that in Wisconsin that works with Feather, and these are just some examples of ads that they shared or served to people who came to the website and left without giving, to kind of encourage them to come back and make that gift.
Yeah, and in the cause selling cycle, we often talk about top of mind awareness and how you can create that, and what are ways in which you can continue to evoke a thought response.
Hmm.
Maybe it is an email that you sent, or following up from a letter that you put out, or this, cart abandonment philosophy as well. And by showcasing the fact that you are reaching out again, in a less direct way, it also creates that top of mind awareness for the donor to be thinking about your organization the next time they are interested in learning more about your mission, or just kind of in the background they see your logo again on an ad,
Yep.
and it makes them think about volunteer opportunities, or the next method of event that you have coming up, and how you can create that top of mind awareness as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think a huge missed opportunity too is when somebody does give, if you don't follow up consistently after they give, you'll fall off the radar. And so that, kind of eliminates the possibility of that person becoming a sustainer, a recurring giver, which again can be the backbone for a lot of nonprofits. And so you want to make sure that you are following up before someone has made that first gift, right? And then following up after. And again, this is retargeting. And at this point, you have their email because they converted, they filled out a form. And so you can hit them from all angles, right? And really stay top of mind for them. Because yeah, the top of funnel, I think we think about it as like people who've never heard of us, getting them into the funnel, getting them aware of our cause, and pushing them down. But you have that sort of, it's not like everyone is in the same place as each other as a group coming through a funnel. Each individual user is experiencing their own version of a funnel with you. And so even somebody who has given before, maybe they gave 3 years ago, I would consider that to be kind of like a top of funnel thing again at this point, right? Getting them, they're aware of your cause, but they're far removed. You want to bring them back into the fold. You might have to reconvince them of, why they should give. And even somebody who, just gave at end of year and you haven't followed up with them yet, like they're not necessarily top of funnel because they gave recently, but you want to make sure that you're staying on their radar to kind of keep them in that, maybe keep them in that middle of funnel place, all the time to get them primed to give again potentially, or just to become, to become a recurring giver. Another creative thing that I saw from one of the organizations that we work with this past end of year was that they were encouraging people to become recurring givers on their homepage by saying that they would match gifts if people signed up to become recurring givers. So they had a gift match campaign set up, but instead of telling everybody if you give once, we'll match it 2x or 3x, they said if you sign up to become a recurring giver today, we will match your gift. And so I thought that was really cool because, again, the gift match campaigns do drive people to take action more than not. And that could be a great way to get people to, sign that, fill out that form to become a recurring giver and then kind of a set it and forget it thing. They know they're giving to your cause. Even if it's $5 a month, that is going to add up to more over time than somebody who gives a one-time gift on average. So.
And definitely in these processes, you're often able to convince an existing donor to give again, even if it's been 2, 3 years. Maybe you looked at a LIBUNT report or a SciBunt report, and then from there you're able to get their support again rather than a new donor acquisition. So, you know, really relying on your existing donor base to find more support and build them through the pipeline, whether it is through recurring giving or making a second annual gift and so on and so forth.
And it is more cost effective to get a past donor to give again than to get a new person to give for the first time. So
Right.
definitely want to be focusing your efforts on people who've engaged with you because they are your warmest people. Okay, so when it comes to social media, we've kind of talked about some of this already, but just thinking about the platforms themselves in terms of these different generations. So for millennials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter are the places that you're going to want to be showing up if you can. They have a slightly longer attention span, so you can do a little bit more of that long form content, videos, podcasts, written long form written content like blogs. I think a lot of millennials are still willing to consume longer form written content as well. You can A/B test content length too. You want to make sure that you're A/B testing everything that you can, messaging, headlines on your website, ad copy, things like that. But you can A/B test content length, try some different things on different platforms and see what resonates and what's more effective. It could be that for your organization, short form content is the most impactful across the board. And, that's where you want to focus most of your content. And millennials are old enough to make purchasing decisions, which makes it easier to, rely on them as the whole generation as potential donors. Gen Z, you have TikTok and Snapchat as the main platforms. And then in a minute, I'll talk about where you want to be if you are trying to reach both, right? In just a couple platforms. Shorter attention span, so those shorter content, shorter videos, mobile optimized content. So again, mobile first is the way that Gen Z was raised, and so they expect a very mobile friendly experience from all brands, including nonprofits. And then make your language memorable and brief, so get to the point in the first 2 or 3 seconds. If you have a 30-second video and you're not getting to the point until 15 seconds in, you're going to lose people. And then leveraging influencers who have a relevant, engaged audience if you can. So let's talk a little bit about that. Influencer marketing, I think, can sound kind of daunting or sound like something that only big brands can figure out how to navigate. But the key here is to aim for people who have a brand and an audience that align really closely with your mission, and oftentimes aiming for what we call micro influencers. So rather than trying to get, like the Mr. Beasts of the world to partner up with your organization, there's not going to be, like maybe some of you will have success partnering with huge influencers, but it's more realistic to just start small and see there's plenty of influencers on social media who have between 5,000 and 50,000 followers. It's a very niche audience, but they're highly engaged, right? Because these influencers are more deeply connected with that many people than a large influencer can be with a huge audience. And so there often is that sort of built-in intimacy and trust with a micro influencer and their audience. So if you can get in on that, that's great. It's that sort of best of both worlds of high engagement with the audience, but also broad reach because 50,000 followers is more than zero. So it's a great place to start. And then simpler to reach, and they have more time for collabs. So, somebody who's a micro influencer is simply going to be reading more of the messages that come through their inbox. So, don't be shy about reaching out to people. Like, I think, again, it can feel like, oh, like, would an influencer care about me or my organization, but all you can do is try. And so I think put feelers out if you feel like there's, you know, um, influencers that you're seeing on TikTok or on Instagram or YouTube or anything like that, where, oh, I think like it would benefit this influencer to align with my cause, and their audience would be super interested in what they have to say about the cause and potentially getting involved with their organization. So there's lots of opportunities for this. You just have to kind of, put some effort into doing a little bit of research and then just be brave about doing outreach. This is, again, another place where having young people on board with your organization is helpful because they're going to sort of know a lot more about the influencer world and maybe know even some ideas about people that could be potential fits. So, bring young people onto your team, onto your advisory boards, wherever you can. This actually is really helpful, and I think it's the way forward. And then regularly show the impact of an influencer's contribution. So making sure that you're highlighting that yourself as the organization and, making it clear to them that they are having an impact and sharing the impact with them so that they can then share that in turn with their audience. And then TikTok for nonprofits. So TikToks should be between 15 to 60 seconds long, on the shorter side if possible. So 15 to 30 is a little bit more optimal. You want to show humanity through your stories. So you can do videos about the impact of someone's donation. If you are able to share video footage or testimonials from beneficiaries, this is a great place to do that. If you can't because of privacy issues, do whatever you can, share volunteer experiences, things like that. But video content, especially short, really consumable video content, can be a really great way to pique people's interest quickly. And again, just show that human side of the work that you do. TikTok for Good is the official hub for charities on TikTok. So check that out and see if it's helpful. They have, examples for organic sharing. They have a lot of helpful tips for nonprofits to get started with a TikTok account. And then, like I said earlier, try things, but be realistic about how sustainable it is. TikTok can be sort of a big undertaking if you don't know what you're doing. So don't do it if you don't have a plan. Start other places first. But if you feel like you have some ideas for videos and you want to get started and you have the means to kind of keep up a semi-regular presence, go ahead and try it out. And then just in terms of some benchmarks and things to expect on social media. So again, this is somewhere where you want a combined approach of paid and organic, just like with search marketing, right? So organic, you're going to have only sort of 10% visibility compared to posts from friends and family. So the algorithms on social media prioritize family connections, friends over businesses. And so you're not going to get the kind of reach that you want or might even expect from organic posting. A lot of nonprofits do organic posting on social media and they don't do more than that. I know that that's a big sort of issue. And so doing organic posting is not going to get you the visibility you want. Boosting your posts, right? So putting a little bit of money behind those organic posts will maybe double or triple the visibility you're getting, but none of it comes close to paid ads on social media. So, you want to be investing some budget into running paid ads on social media because this is where people are spending a lot of their time and it's where they're going to see ads in their feed, and they're more likely to actually see the ads as they're scrolling versus when you're showing up in other places or even the email inbox, right? It's really easy to miss an email. Social, they might pass it or they might see it, but social media feeds are a great place to reach people. And then when you're paying to show ads on social media, you have a lot more control over the format of the ads, the messaging, the content, and the reach itself. You can get really targeted with audiences, so you have a lot of room to play around with that when you're basically paying to play. And then for younger generations, focusing on the cusp of both generations, so kind of looking at that 18 to 34 age bracket. For both of those generations, for everyone in this age group, messaging needs to be clearly about impact and value. So again, building the trust, building the belief in the impact and the real world effect of the donations, and then leveraging networks that millennials and Gen Z have in common. So if you're trying to reach both, focus on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. These are the three platforms where both generations are spending most of their time. And then places like TikTok, Snapchat, those are kind of nice to haves. Twitter as well, but those aren't the sort of the main places that you want to be prioritizing if you're just getting started in paid media on social. And then just a few more budgeting and budgeting recommendations and benchmarks as you're getting into ads. So For Meta, you're going to see an average return on ad spend of 48 cents. And on TikTok, you're going to see an average return on ad spend of 17 cents. And so you might think, why would I spend $1 to get 17 cents back? But you are going to be seeing lower conversion or lower conversion value on these awareness campaigns. So that's simply the price that you pay to get in front of new people on social media and just around the web in general, right? So you're competing with a much broader audience when you're kind of going into a top of funnel net new expansion campaign. You're competing with a lot more companies, a lot more nonprofits, just a lot more noise. And so you are going to have to pay more to get that return of some people clicking through and coming back. And then you'll see on the next slide that once they do click through, you're going to see more than 100% ROI once you start serving ads to people who are engaged and are warm. So real quick, TikTok has the highest organic reach of all the platforms, but the lowest engagement in terms of conversions. So definitely this is a place that you can use to drive mission awareness, but don't expect a whole lot of conversions or action to come from TikTok. This is a place to kind of build your brand, show up on people's radars and get them to be aware. But ultimately, it's going to be showing up again and again and again in different places that's going to get them to convert. And then use UTM codes wherever possible to monitor the website traffic that is coming from social media. So if you're running paid ads on Facebook, you want to make sure you're using specific URLs or UTM codes so that people who are seeing an ad on Facebook and clicking through to your website, you can say, oh, they came from this ad that I served on Facebook. You can actually use UTM codes or these custom URLs for even print material, right? If you are sending out a direct mailer, you can include a QR code that people can scan, and that can have a custom link so that when people scan that QR code on the direct mail piece and arrive on your donate page and maybe give a gift, you know that it came from that direct mail piece. Direct mail can be super impactful for a lot of organizations still. We want to encourage you to get online, go digital if you can. But if direct mail is still working for you, again, don't stop what's working, but track, track, track. So wherever you can find ways to put custom URLs, put QR codes, make things easily scannable, and make it so that you can track the effectiveness of all of the different outreach efforts you're doing, you're going to be able to just justify budget better, right? Say, and maybe you find that actually the direct mailers aren't working as well as you thought because people really are not arriving at your website from those very often. And you might have a lot of major donors who do expect direct mail pieces still. So again, do whatever works for your organization, but tracking each channel, including print pieces, can be a really good way to see like where is our money actually working for us? Where can we redistribute? Can we actually take a little bit of money from our direct mail campaigns, put that behind digital and reach more people on social media and around the web? And then when you are running search and display ads, so those are a little bit more middle of funnel, right? So people who are searching for something relevant, so you know that they're sort of warm, right? They've shown some intent. The click-through rate of these is going to be 0.2 to 0.3%. CPM will be around $2.86. So this is the cost that you pay to serve 1,000 impressions of an ad to a relevant person. And then the return on ad spend that you'll see for these types of campaigns is, like we said, much higher than those awareness ads that you're seeing on social media. So with social media, we were seeing, lower than $1 return. And for these higher intent search and display ads, you see a return on ad spend of $2.23 for search and $1.07 for display. So again, when you're reaching your warmer audience, when you're reaching people who you know are relevant based on things that they've searched for, or because they visited your site and you're retargeting them, you're simply going to see a much higher return on ad spend there because they're not random people that you're hoping are going to engage. They're people who have shown some intent and therefore are more likely to be a better bang for your buck. So, and sort of to sum this up, the best benchmark is beating yourself. So, you don't want to compare yourself to consumer organizations. Don't compare yourself to other nonprofit organizations that might have more people on their marketing team, higher budgets. You don't want to be thinking about that because that's just, that can become a rabbit hole where you can't win. So I think just thinking about, how you performed last year, what can you do this year differently? How can you put a little bit of budget behind digital advertising? How can you Think about your messaging in new ways. Think about how you can get in front of younger people in ways that might resonate more, change some stuff up, and see if you perform better this year than last year. Track some new things, track all of the channels you possibly can, and you'll have more data to go off of than you did last year. So this is the goal. It's really just one-upping yourself year over year with the goal of doing as much good as you possibly can. And then I listed out here all of the resources that I use to pull data for this presentation. So once we send out the deck, these are all clickable. So feel free to check these out and get a little bit more context on what I talked about today. And then, yeah, so in sum, you want to prioritize digital outreach and be mobile first, right? Make sure everything is seamlessly easy for people to navigate from ads to website to um, the full experience of giving to your organization, building trust through that consistent communication and creating community, evoke action through impactful storytelling. So, sharing real stories of impact, sharing donor experiences, sharing volunteer experiences, test and retest messaging and channels. So, A/B test everything you can and give yourself grace and be patient and do your best. All right.
Fantastic. I mean, my brain is just buzzing with so much knowledge, and I'm definitely going to look into those resources. Thank you so much for taking time to share with us and learn with the community. Just one question that I also have, and I'm sure others are thinking as well, like if teams are, smaller nonprofits, don't have the capacity to do everything on social media, you identified a few different platforms that would be the most relevant based on the generations and the targeting that we want to do. You
Mhm.
often mentioned about like consistent presence. So I know it may not be possible for people to come up with posts every single day. What is a good enough strategy that if somebody's just starting out and then they can build from there, like how consistent should it be? Should it be a few times a week? Should it be every other day? Should it be depending on the platform where you have the most engagement? What are some tips there?
Yeah, so I would say when it comes to social media, if you are doing paid advertising versus just organic, you don't have to think as much about, oh, what should I post today? Do I have new content, right? Because you're creating ads that are showing up for people regularly, right? And so the number of impressions per person kind of is determined by the budget that you have and how much it costs to show those ads. So that's going to vary. We looked at the number, I think it was 286 is the CPM to show 1,000 ads to people. And so, depending on your budget and depending on CPM for the audiences that you're trying to reach, that will look different. But you can serve, even 43 ads on Facebook with similar messaging to learn about your cause to one person. And that, I know that sounds insane, but it's not. And so, just the number of impressions is going to be largely determined by budget. And if you have the right platform that helps you run, so whether you're doing it natively on Meta or you're using a platform like Feather or another digital marketing platform where you can manage your social media paid efforts, there's lots of recommendations around budgeting and how many impressions you should serve per person. But in terms of sort of coming up with fresh messaging, I think it is easier when you're doing paid media because you're just kind of thinking, okay, what do I want people who've never heard about my organization to see from me? You create some ads, right? And you might want to have some ad copy variants and try different creatives and switch that up regularly. But believe it or not, having the same ad show up multiple times to somebody in a way that's specific to their journey on Facebook and online, that's not going to be repetitive to them because really the goal is getting them to see you and then getting them to engage. Once they do that, if they come to your website and then leave without converting, you have sort of a second phase of the funnel where then they start seeing paid ads on Meta or wherever you're showing up with different messaging that's going to be a little bit warmer, a little bit more relevant to what they did on your website. And so it really is a matter of thinking about the different stages of engagement, coming up with messaging that applies, and then serving those ads and putting budget behind it and just showing up as many times as possible for as many relevant audience members. And so that's, I think, a lot more straightforward sometimes than thinking about like, oh, kind of someone brought their dog to the office. Let me take a picture of it and like post it on Instagram. Like there's lots of cute stuff you can do with organic, but it is a lot more work in terms of just thinking of new content, keeping it fresh, and posting manually, basically, when you
Right.
have new content.
Yeah. So maybe having enough organic posts to showcase a presence of like what
Yes.
your mission and vision is, but then really focusing on ads to do the rest.
Because that's where you're going to get the conversions. I do think like you just said, organic is it's a great way to build brand presence. It's a great way to seem human. That's a great way to, you can and a lot of the stuff that you're sharing in your paid ads might be inspiration for and vice versa, right? So if you're
Right.
sharing volunteer experiences, you can maybe include some of that in an ad, but you can also like have a video that you share organically of a volunteer talking about their experience. So there is some overlap there, but yeah, when it comes to paid ads, it really is kind of a set it up, see what's working, put some budget, and just monitor and then switch up the creatives from time to time. But really, you're just trying to create that experience for each user and get them to engage and give, and then they're in.
Amazing. So much food for thought, and definitely going to take away some of these strategies very soon and put them to the test and continue to track it, right? And I loved how you said like keep your benchmark as your own growth. So you're just comparing to continue to grow from what you've done and what your network has capacity for. So a lot of tidbits. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, and I learned so much. I hope that you connect with Isa and myself on LinkedIn. You can also follow Fundraising Academy's profile and join our email list. We want to remind you that we have our online learning portal where you can sign up at no cost. We'll put up that slide as well so you can scan that QR code. And then additionally, our upcoming webinar on February 18th with the wonderful Jarrett Ransom, who's going to be presenting on managing value-driven donor objections with confidence. My buddy Jack Alato will be moderating that session, so you can register there at no cost. And the key takeaways are going to be understanding deeper drivers behind donor objections, including values, perceptions, and emotional responses. You're going to be able to apply proven communication strategies to keep the conversation focused on the mission by de-escalating tension and focus on building trust. You get to communicate your nonprofit's mission in ways that connect with viewpoints while staying true to your values and reframe objections as opportunities to deepen engagement and strengthen donor relationships. So you'll definitely want to tune in and register for that session. Lastly, we have our Fundraising Essential Certificate, where you can learn more about our 125-hour flexible modular certificate, where we love to help busy fundraisers like yourself meet their professional development goals. You can get a certificate individually or at a reduced rate for fundraising teams. So you can scan that QR code and everything is self-paced. Last but not least, thank you for attending and joining and learning with us. And we hope that you continue to join our Fundraising Academy webinars. So, with that, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye bye.